Greetings. My name is Abu Bakr Ukta, and I am broadcasting to you from my home in Washington, D.C. Today's episode of Learning About International Relations will consist of defining the concepts of power, analyzing the different factors that shape power distribution in the international system, and critically discussing the perspectives from different authors regarding power in international relations. Today, we have the wonderful opportunity to talk with 4 students of global studies. But because of the current situation due to the worldwide COVID-19 pandemic, we have recorded the interview via Zoom, a digital platform. Today, we will discuss 2 texts, one being a joint text by scholars Michael Barnett and Raymond Duval, and another by a professor of international relations, Robert Art. Our guests today, Carla Gil Leviedna, Gala Luthino, and Joanne Yonk, have shared with us how power is seen and its roles according to Duval, Barnett, and Art's theories. So we hope that with this interview, you'll be able to get to know some important theories which have been relevant in the last century, and ultimately how these authors can help us define what power is to us. Good evening to our honorable guests. To start, how does each author contemplate power? What common points do they share? And in which areas do they tend to differ?
Thanks, Abu Bakr. Answering your first question, we all think that power is central to international relations. Yet, it is a controversial concept, as the scholars differ on its core concepts. For example, Barnett and Duval argue that when talking about power, there's a tendency to consider only the realist conceptions, and this is because its rival conceptions have expressly distanced themselves of the concept of power. Their aim, then, is to offer an alternative definition, which also considers how social structures and processes generate differential social capacities for actors to define and pursue their interests and ideals. According to them, therefore, power is the production in and through social relations of effects that shape the capacities of actors to determine their circumstances and fate. They don't understand power as a single formulation, but as a multilateral concept which is affected by different analytical dimensions.
These dimensions are kinds of social relations through which power works, and the specificity of social relations through which effects on actors are produced. The former, which ultimately refer to how power is expressed, differentiates between social relations of interaction and social relations of constitution. This is how particular social relations constitute certain types of actors. On the other hand, the latter separates between direct relations, which is the immediate and tangible connection between 2 subjects, and diffuse ones, connections that are detached and mediated.
These 2 core dimensions that my colleagues have explained generate a fourfold taxonomy of power. So through the combination of the variables of each dimension, each conception is constituted. These conceptions we're talking about are compulsory, institutional, structural, and productive power. Let's start with compulsory power. Compulsory power is power as the direct control that one actor has over the existence or the actions of another, even if it's unintentional. Then we would have institutional power, which is power as the control actors exercise indirectly over others through diffuse relations of interaction. This essentially means how institutions are able to constrain a state's power. Now we have structural power, which refers to the constitution of subjects' capacities in direct structural relation to one another, which means that social relational capacities, subjectivities, and interests of actors are directly shaped by the social positions that they occupy. Finally, we have productive power, which works to diffuse constitutive relations to produce situated social capacities of actors. All these types of powers have different areas of application. However, despite the differences, they are intertwined.
Also, Raphael Jeffrey Art offers another conception of power, which differentiates between a state's various power assets. He affirms that the instruments of statecraft are population, geography, governance, value, wealth, leadership, and military power, and compares them depending on how fungible they are. After analyzing and contrasting them, Art determines that wealth, political skill, and military power are the most fungible ones. Wealth is integral to military power, in the sense that large and rich states are more capable to generate larger amounts of military power. For example, it's obvious that Malawi won't have enough wealth to sustain a military structure such as the US one. Political skill allows us to operate well in different policy realms, due to the techniques of persuasion and influence adopted and mastered by the operators. These two power assets are resources that are easily transferable from one policy realm to another, and they are probably the most liquid power assets.
Also, military power, out of them all, is the most fungible one, as it can be used for a wide variety of tasks and across different policy domains. It can be employed for both military and non-military purposes. Thus, he agrees with Baldwin on the importance of this kind of power. However, Baldwin argues that military power alone is not enough, and despite Art agrees, he does highlight it is the most important aspect. And on the other hand, Art also considers that the anarchic international realm gives military power more importance, since force is integral to political interaction and foreign policy cannot be divorced from military power. Returning to the concept of fungibility, Art also specifies how force can achieve fungibility. This is through the spillover effect or through linkage politics. The first one refers to the effects that military power has on the other policy domains. When force is used against force, this is military to military encounters. The results are not only military but also political, which are either prerequisite or a byproduct. Meanwhile, linkage politics designates when military power is linked to a non-military issue. So force is linked to another issue, with the purpose of strengthening a state's bargaining leverage on that issue. This can be through functional or artificial links. In both cases, military power becomes fungible because it produces effects outside the strictly military domain.
Interesting points have been raised in this short conversation about the backgrounds of these texts. Thank you all very much for your contributions. Now, let's move on to a more narrow discussion in regards to these writings. Which of these two contemplations of power is more useful to help us understand the dynamics of the international system? And how so?
Well, you raise a complex question. I personally think it's difficult to establish which one portrays better the dynamics within the international system, as each of the authors focuses on a different sphere on the international arena. Therefore, both theories provide a useful framework to understand this field. While Barnett and Duval focus on the different types of power that emerge depending on the relations among countries, Art focuses more on how the attributes that exist within a country, which are the so-called power sets, affect the dynamics between countries.
I agree with Gara, but I would also add that although a good combination of both theories would portray better the international dynamics, Barnett and Duval's concept is more accurate to understand what actually gives power to states. This is because in the international sphere, when interactions occur, power always becomes relative depending on whom you relate to. Besides this, it also does a good job in characterizing the different reasons due to which power can arise.
I believe that Barnett and Duval is overall the most accurate one. It is able to detach discussion of power from the limitations of realism and to encourage scholars to see power's multiple forms. It provides a framework for integration. Taxonomies do not only highlight distinct types, but also point to connections between them. It incorporates both social relations of interaction and constitution. Also, it does not map precisely onto different theories of international relations. And finally, it illustrates why attention to the multiple forms of power effects empirical research.
Meanwhile, Art's work focuses on quite different ideas to explain the dynamics of the international system. First of all, he highlights the military capability as the most important one, since it has influence in various factors such as the political field, and it can be used to hide some of a state's weaknesses. He also argues that military power is a better defense mechanism than conquest, as deterring is easier than compelling. And military power is crucial because alone, it cannot guarantee pacification once conquest has taken place. For example, it can create legitimacy. Art tends to focus exclusively on a structural realist point of view, but falls short compared to Barnett and Duval, since they provide a more detailed and comprehensive contemplation of power, which can be better used in international relations. Art gives the main and absolute role to the military power, as he believes that nearly all the dynamics of the international society can be described with it.
Thank you, Carla, for the last word in this great dialect. As I've heard, it can be concluded that Barnett and Duval provide the best contemplation of power in regards to international relations. Although, Art's remarks of military power's fungibility provides additional tools to their analysis. After analyzing these texts, we can conclude this program by defining what power is to us. Power boils down to the role of superiority, which enables you to influence the behavior of others or the course of events. Power is given by a wide variety of attributes, although we can note the essential ones. First being economic capabilities, how strong your currency is compared to the dollar, the economic growth and its productivity, the importance of the production in the international trade and the ability to influence it, and the type of economy and the industry, high-skilled or low-skilled labor. Secondly, we have military power, nuclear power, geographical control and reach, troop deployments, and camps. This leads to geographical location and property of raw materials or the control of natural resources. We can take the prime example of the United States. It has a great geographical location, or the natural endowments of a country such as Saudi Arabia. Ideological influence and legitimacy in the international system can also be highlighted, which are obligatory elements of soft power. Lastly, alliances between states help to increase powers of smaller countries while mitigating certain overpowering aspects of bigger ones, ultimately leading to the balance of power. Besides such causes of power, it also has consequences. As mentioned previously, power allows actors to have a say in the international system, although at the end of the day, the state will end up using their power for whatever is in their best interest, regardless of the consequences. Thank you all for taking the time to watch today's episode, and we hope that you will join us again soon. Stay safe.